Oh, my name is Kara Johnson, and today we're going to discuss a little bit about race, ethnicity, and sports and how they all tie along together. Promise I will not bore you, but this is a topic that I can literally discuss for hours at a time. And so we'll get started with our definitions. So, first definition, race. A population of people who are believed to be naturally or biologically distinct from other populations, that being African American, white, Asian, Hispanic, so on and so forth. Those things that we check when we fill out paperwork. Then we have our definition for ethnicity, and which refers to a cultural heritage that people use to identify a particular population, this being Latinos, Africans, so on and so forth from there. Now, these words can be used or normally are used interchangeably. They do have two totally different definitions, and that's something that we do have to keep in mind. And so from there, we have to think about our minorities, which is a group of people who feel as though they suffer certain disadvantages. And, a lot of the times that is seen in our Black communities, it's seen in our Hispanic communities, sometimes in our Asian communities, so on and so forth. It is unfortunately something that has been going on for a very long time. And even here now in 2021, it still seems to continue. Maybe not as strong as it was at that time way back when, but it is still something that is seen today. And so from the 18th century into the 20th century, race ideologies were used as an explanation as to why people of color were more primitive. I did say primitive. And unfortunately, at that time, that was a way for these people to differentiate group by group. And again, unfortunately, our people of color were deemed as animalistic. One that always comes into my mind is her name was European Sarah Bartman, or her African name Sartige Bartman, where she was captured from her West African village. She was taken, misused, prostituted, and eventually was put on display after her death, and where people would poke at her due to her backside being so large and her body being so differently shaped than the norm. Yes. And so this has been seen for people for a very long time. During slavery, there were these male slaves were put out there in fighting rings, just as you would chickens, like a cockfight. These men were also put out there to fight and go back and forth, and different slave owners from different plantations and different people around would come on and watch as they brutally attack one another and fight one another until normally someone ends up passing. But that was as the time went. On the abolishment of slavery, it was still seen that the white race was superior over the Black race in particular. And so you would have complete and total separation, whether that be whites only restaurants, whites only restrooms, black only restrooms, black only restaurants, even segregated water fountains. Even on buses at the time, your people of color would have to migrate towards the back, and whites only could sit in the front. And as we all know, the Rosa Parks story, where she was not willing to give up her seat and move to the back of the bus. And that is what started our civil rights movement. And so from there, we get desegregation, which then allowed for blacks and whites to now congregate in the same restaurants and the same schools, so on and so forth. You may be asking, how does this tie along with sports? Well, just as I said earlier, boxing, fighting, MMA. Where does that really come from? So when we have slaves coming together to fight one another, to go back and forth, and to beat each other till the end, boxing, Jack Johnson, early 1900s, champion. But he was only loved because he could get out there and he could whoop a tail. He could fight to the end. But for his color, not so much. He was respected. He was well respected due to the fights that he would participate in. But as far as his skin color, Still didn't happen. Fast forward, some of our most popular sports being football, basketball, the majority of those teams consist of people of color, black males, who are participating in a sport that they have more than likely loved since they were, as we in the country say, knee high to a grasshopper. Very small. And to see that is awesome. But I still have to ask that question. Is it just for mere entertainment? Because I personally have been to sporting events where one of the players has made wrong move, messed up, didn't make the shot, whatever the case may be, and derogatory terms are being thrown out there because they're mad. So that shows, do you respect me as a person, or are you just respecting me right now because I'm entertaining you enough? That's a big question, and that question has been asked for a very long time, and it may not ever be an answer to it. It may not ever be an answer to it. But at this point in time, the only way to rectify the situation is to allow, as even stated in our book, in Sports in Society by Jay Coakley, the only way to really make each of these teams as diverse and inclusive as possible is to not just recruit people based on their color, based off of their ability, based off of what they're able to do. Not just because you know that this person grew up in the hood and has played sports all their life and has no academic future, but football is their only future. That's not fair. And that is just an opinion, but that's not fair. So at this point in time, if we can make things more diverse and inclusive by just looking at a person's ability rather than their color, and just show me what you have to offer, we'd be in there.